Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something pretty focused. It's a deep dive into one specific and honestly pretty charged document from way back. But the main thing we're looking at is how it got pulled out again, the context it was put into more recently.
Right. The source itself is called the Homosexual Manifesto by someone named Michael Swift. And we're really looking at excerpts of it that showed up in a 2016 article. It was in the Journal of Psychology and Clinical Psychiatry. And that article's author, Dr. Samuel Negro, he really analyzes it.
Yeah, and just to be clear up front, our focus here is strictly on the content, what's in the manifesto as presented, and what are the claims Dr. Negro makes about it in his article.
Exactly. We're just laying out what the sources say.
And Negro's framing, it starts right away with the title of his article. It gives you this immediate context.
It does. He claims the manifesto was referenced to Congress way back in 1987. But then, and this is the kicker, he says it was, quote, implemented by the Entropic U.S. Supreme Court in 2015.
Wow. Okay, so that's quite a bridge he's building there. 1987 to 2015, linked by this one document.
A very dramatic link, yeah. He's basically saying a court decision wasn't just a legal ruling, it was the execution of this decades-old plan.
Okay, let's unpack that framing a bit more. The author, Dr. Negro, he has credentials, right?
Yes, the article lists him as retired assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at Case Western Reserve University's School of Medicine, and he gives this specific sourcing for the Swift Manifesto. He says it was reprinted from the Congressional Record, and that the Record got it from a publication called Gay Community News back in '87.
So he's setting up this chain of publication, trying to root it in, like official records.
Precisely. It lends it a kind of historical weight, regardless of what the original text might have actually been intended as.
But then his commentary, it goes way beyond just presenting a historical document.
Oh, absolutely. He calls the manifesto a gay cult constitution.
A cult constitution.
Yeah. And he says the reason you, the listener, probably haven't read it is because of, and this is his quote, pure evil from newsrooms and journalists everywhere.
So right off the bat, it's framed as suppressed information, a conspiracy.
Definitely. It's not just history for him. He argues it's a plan that worked. He says the manifesto has, quote, become fact and the American way as promulgated by the United States Supreme Court.
And he keeps using that phrase, Entropic U.S. Supreme Court. What's that about?
Well, entropic suggests moving towards chaos, dissolution. So he's framing the court's decisions, influenced by this manifesto, he claims, as pushing society towards breakdown. It's central to his whole argument.
Okay, so that's the frame. A hidden blueprint, supposedly enacted by the highest court. To really get what Negro's arguing, though, we need to look at the manifesto itself. What does it actually say?
Right. Let's set aside Negro's interpretation for a moment and just look at the text he's presenting.
Yeah.
And the demands are, well, they're sweeping.
It's not just asking for rights, is it?
Not at all. It's calling for a complete teardown and replacement of society's structure. And it starts with the family.
Okay, what does it say about the family?
It calls for the absolute abolition of the family unit. Labels it the spawning ground of lies, betrayals, mediocrity, hypocrisy, and violence.
Strong words.
Very. It claims the family dampens imagination and curbs free will, and flat out says it must be eliminated.
So eliminate the family. What's the replacement then?
It gets, well, quite specific. It talks about creating perfect boys.
Perfect boys.
Yes, quote, conceived and grown in the genetic laboratory. These boys would then be raised communally, taught and controlled by homosexual savants.
Like the kind of eugenics program almost tied to ideology.
It certainly reads that way. A very controlled vision of raising children.
And this control extends beyond just raising kids, right? Into culture.
Big time. Yeah, a total cultural takeover seems to be the goal. Controlling arts, media, everything. It says, we shall write poems of the love between men, stage plays where man openly caresses man.
So making homosexual relationships the norm in art.
And actively displacing heterosexual themes. It talks about making films about heroic men specifically to replace, quote, insipid, juvenile, heterosexual infatuations.
So it's not coexistence, it's replacement.
That's the tone, yeah. It even gets into visual arts.
How so?
Demands for sculptures of beautiful young men, of bold athletes in parks, and museums filled only with paintings of graceful, naked lads.
An aesthetic purge, you called it earlier?
It sounds like that, yeah. And there's a strategy against heterosexual relationships, too.
What kind of strategy?
Using, quote, wit and ridicule. The text says, we shall employ these devices to eliminate heterosexual liaisons, basically shaming and mocking them out of existence.
Wow. Okay, so cultural overhaul, undermining the family, displacing heterosexuality in art and life.
Yeah.
What about power? Politics.
Yeah, this is where it shifts again. It declares, we are the natural aristocrats of the human race.
Natural aristocrat.
Yep. Claims homosexuals are inherently more intelligent, more refined, and because of that, they will accept no compromises.
And that sense of superiority, does it translate into political demands?
It does. First, revoke all laws against homosexual activity. Okay, that's a standard rights demand. But then it goes further. Pass new laws that actively engender love between men. So using the law to promote their specific vision.
So not just legal neutrality, but state promotion.
Seems to be the idea. And then there's this whole theme of infiltration.
Infiltration.
Yeah, this claim, we are everywhere, we have infiltrated your ranks. It's very dramatic. And it threatens to out powerful figures, presidents, senators, generals, priests, celebrities who are supposedly secretly gay.
Why? What's the point of that?
The text says it's to make the heterosexual population shocked and frightened. It's psychological warfare almost.
And it calls for unity among homosexuals.
Total unity. All homosexuals must stand together as brothers, it says, artistically, philosophically, socially, politically, financially, presenting a united front against the, quote, vicious heterosexual enemy.
Enemy. That's dark language. Does it get physically threatening?
Oh, yes. This is probably the most quoted part, and it's incredibly harsh. It directly threatens violence. It says, if you dare to cry faggot, we will stab you in your cowardly hearts and defile your dead, puny bodies.
Okay. Yeah.
That's extreme.
Extremely violent rhetoric, yes. It's not subtle. It frames it as a response to oppression, but the response itself is, well, brutal.
And it doesn't stop there, right? There's military stuff, historical revisionism.
Right. It talks about raising vast private armies, as Mishima did, Yukio Mishima, the controversial Japanese author.
Private armies?
And claims that warriors inspired by and banded together by homosexual love and honor are invincible, referencing ancient Greek soldiers.
So a militaristic element. And the history part. A plan to rewrite history, to show that great leaders, great thinkers, Plato, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Shakespeare, according to the text, were homosexual. The goal seems to be to create this historical lineage to justify their claim of being the natural aristocrats.
So remake the present, remake the past. What about religion? Morality.
That gets overhauled too. It demands closing churches that condemn homosexuals and replacing traditional religion with a cult of beauty. Quote, our only gods are handsome young men.
A cult of beauty.
Yeah, and anything deemed ugly and vulgar and banal will be annihilated. So morality becomes purely aesthetic. If it's not beautiful by their standard, it's wrong.
And how would this new society actually be run? Who's in charge?
An elite. Specifically gay poets. They will govern this new, exquisite society.
Gay poets are the rulers.
That's what it says. And there's a key requirement for power. Indulgence in the Greek passion, meaning homosexual acts. If you're, quote, contaminated with heterosexual lust, you're automatically barred from influence.
Exclusionary based on sexuality. And what happens to heterosexual men in this vision?
The manifesto gives them a specific fate. Men who insist on being stupidly heterosexual will be, quote, tried in homosexual courts of justice and will become invisible men.
Invisible men, total erasure.
Social and political erasure, yes. That's the stated end goal for dissenters.
And the very final line of the manifesto. It's quite famous, isn't it?
It is. It ends with, tremble, hetero swine, when we appear before you without our masks.
Chilling. Okay, so that's the manifesto itself. Now loop back to Dr. Negro's 2016 article. How does he wrap all this up? What's his final warning?
Well, after presenting these excerpts and arguing the Supreme Court already implemented parts of it in 2015, he makes another provocative claim. He says this manifesto project isn't finished.
Yeah.
He claims it's now being pushed forward, quote, disguised as help, yet to be fulfilled for minor attracted persons, MAPs.
Wait, he connects this manifesto to MAPs.
Explicitly. He warns that this is the next stage of the plan outlined in the manifesto and implies the Supreme Court will follow these directions again. That's how he concludes his analysis.
Okay, so let's try to summarize for the listener. We've looked at two main things here. First, this really radical, decades-old text, the Homosexual Manifesto, filled with these demands for total social upheaval, replacement of the family, cultural dominance, even violence.
Right. And second, this much more recent academic-style article by Dr. Negro, which takes that manifesto and claims it's not just some fringe rant from the past. He argues it was a blueprint that the U.S. Supreme Court actually followed, and that it's still an active plan, now potentially involving MAPs.
So you have the extreme vision of the manifesto itself, and then this equally extreme interpretation and framing from Negro linking it directly to modern law and predicting future steps.
Exactly. The crucial thing to see is how a historical text, whatever its original intent or reach might have been, and frankly the origins are murky, can be picked up later and used rhetorically. Negro uses the manifesto's shock value to support his argument about contemporary society and the courts. He connects the dots for his readers, whether those dots were ever truly connected in reality or not.
It really highlights how texts can take on new lives, depending on who's framing them and why.
Definitely.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, drawing from the material itself. Manifesto, amidst all the aggression, says its authors are fueled with the ferocious bitterness of the oppressed. They feel they've been forced to play bit parts in a dumb heterosexual show for ages. Does acknowledging that self-described source of bitterness, that feeling of historical oppression, however extreme the expression, change how you understand the demands in the document? Does understanding the why behind the rage, even if you reject the rage itself, offer any different perspective on this kind of extreme rhetoric when you encounter it today?
That's something to think about. How the stated motivation interacts with the proposed action.
Exactly, something to mull over.